Okay, I'm going to begin with a few quotes, which I found quite interesting and very, very true, of course. Now, this particular quotation, where I come from, we believe lots of things that aren't true. We call it history. Has anybody ever seen the musical Wicked? Yeah. This is actually, the Wizard of Oz actually says that in Wicked, which I thought was great when I saw it. So I thought I'd put that one in there. And Henry Ford, the car man, he said history is more or less bunk. He's absolutely correct. And the French philosopher Voltaire also said history is a lie commonly agreed upon. And somebody by the name of John Hamer, I think it says, almost everything you think you know about history and science is totally wrong. And that's from The Falsification of History. Now, there was a French philosopher by the name of, French author, beg your pardon, by the name of Honoré de Balzac, and he said quite accurately, there are two world histories. One is the official and full of lies, destined to be taught in schools. The other is the secret history, which harbours the true causes and occurrences. Again, all true stuff. And this is a great quote from Malcolm X, and it applies to me too. Okay, so I'm not going to pull any punches. I'm not the kind of person who comes here to say what you like. I'm going to tell you the truth, whether you like it or not. Malcolm X was a great guy, by the way. Okay, now what is a conspiracy theorist? I think that's fairly true. I'm going to show you one or two other definitions of it, but that is one that fits the bill. And again, I don't know whether you can you all read the slides at the back? Is that?
Yeah.
You do better than I would then. My eyesight's awful. This is why I'm stood so close to the screen, because I can't see it otherwise. So, a conspiracy theorist, it's somebody who believes that powerful people have a lot of influence, actually use that power to maintain or grow that influence. And the opposite of a conspiracy theorist, a coincidence theory. Somebody who believes that everything happens by sheer coincidence. There's no conspiracy going on. There's no such thing as corruption, deceit or backroom deals. And mankind just absolutely got over the desire for world domination. Which one sounds more insane, or which one sounds more plausible? I think we'll all agree on that one. We don't need to say it. You know, I often tell people that I don't believe in coincidences, and it's a kind of a glib statement, but it is basically true. Apparently John Hamer is just a conspiracy theorist. I wish I'd got a pound for every time I've been called that. But, you know, have you noticed how anything that goes against the prevailing agenda is called a conspiracy theory? And it's just a way of basically discrediting us. When we make statements, when we produce facts that prove that the whole of reality is false, we're conspiracy theorists. It's a weapon that they use. For some reason that stopped working, which is very inconvenient. I'm going to have to use my mouse, sorry. Right, okay. So what is a conspiracy theory? Well, it was actually coined by the CIA in the aftermath of the JFK assassination. It was aimed at anyone who criticised or contradicted or disagreed with the Warren Report, which was the report into JFK's death. So the CIA, coined it as a weapon to use against people, and over time it's become used to discredit anybody who exposes their lies. So I think that's enough about conspiracy theories. But apart from the fact that apparently not only am I a conspiracy theorist, I've also been accused of the following: a racist, misogynistic, homophobic, Holocaust-denying, anti-Semitic, COVID-denying, anti-vaxxer, and a climate change-denying, anti-science, flat earth loony, and extreme right-wing terrorist. Now, you all heard of this gentleman, Nikola Tesla. He said, and it's absolutely true, that today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. And that just about sums up science today, as we'll see as we go through. It's pretty simple. You'll see it in the next hour or so exactly what I mean. But here's another great quote. We will get onto the presentation in a minute, honestly. This is just kind of the preamble. But this is from one of my heroes, my early heroes. Back in the day, 27 years ago, when I first ventured into this world of truth, I didn't know anyone else. I didn't know anyone else who felt the same way that I did. You know, I had quite a traumatic time of it in the first few years. My family turned against me. I'm okay. My family turned against me, all my friends. But yeah, I'm just being silly. But yeah, I didn't know anyone else. But one of my heroes at that time was this guy, Bill Cooper. He wrote a very, very influential book, and which was one of the first books that I read on truth, and it's called Behold a Pale Horse. And he said, I do not advise you what you should believe or not believe, but I do advise you that we all need to learn as much as we can about everything we can, because one thing I've learned in my life is that most of what we've ever been taught has been a lie. Now, does anyone know Bill Cooper? I mean, I don't know him personally, but yeah. Okay, well, Bill, for those who are not aware, sadly, he was assassinated on his own doorstep by the FBI. The reason being that he actually predicted 9/11 2 months before it happened. And 6 weeks after, he was dead. Because he had a radio show and he splashed it all over the airwaves, there was going to be an event. And he got it pretty accurate. Because he was an ex-naval officer, he did have some kind of inkling of inside information. So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, what we're going to talk about is basically 20th century hoax. Well, actually, it's probably earlier than 20th century. You could actually apply that going back a couple of hundred years and possibly even further. Yeah. So, as the saying goes, the truth will set you free. That's a famous quote from the Bible. But first... and it's true, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sure you've all experienced that. So, theories, and I emphasise that word theory, we will cover are the Big Bang Theory, the theory of evolution, and the globe Earth theory. I can see this one's going to be a bit controversial with some people, but bear with me. Now, together, those three elements of science are designed to convince us that we are completely different to the reality that they prescribe. In other words, that we're nothing, we're just a tiny, insignificant speck of nothingness in a vast universe. And that, believe it or not, totally disempowers us. And it makes us believe that we have no power and we're not the powerful spiritual beings that we really are. So, yeah, and obviously that will become apparent as we go through it. Now, I always get asked about this. My research, where do I get my research from? Lots and lots of different sources. But one of them is other authors on related topics, standing on the shoulders of giants, if you will. Everybody does it. It doesn't mean I'm a plagiarist, but, you know, they come up with ideas and I kind of expand on them. So, various other resources. In the past, I've used all these archives, libraries, and of course the ubiquitous internet. But one of my main sources, and this is a really valuable source to me, is this book. And I think that, you know, it's well worth buying this book if you really want to know the truth. Yeah. So first of all, we're going to talk about the Big Bang Theory, which goes something like this. In the beginning, there was nothing. which was then divided by 0, and the destruction of nothing made the universe. And I'm sure we all believe that to be true. Well, I know that I do. Yeah. So let's take a look at the answers to a few questions. What is it? When was it proposed? By whom? And why? So we'll begin with the first one, I think. Well, it was proposed that this nothingness exploded and created this vast universe that we have 13.5 billion years ago. And as I said, it states that first there was nothing, which then exploded and created it. And that in itself contradicts the first law of thermodynamics, which states that matter can be neither created nor destroyed. So straight away, they are going against one of the main laws of physics, or their physics, shall we say. Not that I totally believe their physics anyway. It was first proposed by a guy by the name of Georges Lamette, who was a Jesuit priest in 1931. And I believe that it was an attempt to unify science and religion. Up until that point, science and religion have been absolutely at loggerheads. Okay, religion was anti-science and science was anti-religion. But I think that was an attempt to unify it. And what it does, what it actually does for both, it creates a plausible and acceptable solution. Okay, because the religious people could say, yes, well, it was God that created the Big Bang. And the scientists can say, yeah, okay, then we'll kind of accept that. But really, we don't believe it. But, you know, that was a way of the two elements coming together. So, I think that slide's been... It states that the universe is constantly expanding, which of course is very strange because when something explodes, eventually it slows. It doesn't expand, but yeah. Minor point. And perhaps unsurprisingly, Lemaitre was a Jesuit. I don't know whether you're all aware of the undue influence that Jesuits have. You know, we talk about Jews and how Jews have an undue influence. Well, a lot of people, I don't include myself in that, but a lot of people within the truth movement actually believe that it's the Jesuits that control the Jews and use them as a front for their own nefarious activities. It could be true. It could be true. Yeah, but as I said, how can expansion continue forever? It's totally impossible. After any explosion, momentum is gradually lost, not gained. And the expansion should be slowing, not gaining momentum. Now, according to their laws of gravity, and we'll come on to talk a little bit about gravity because that's very important in what I'm talking about here. All mass has a gravitational effect that pulls objects together. And this is part of Einstein's theory of relativity. I can't remember which one it was because there were two, but it's one of them where he talks about gravity. Now, science uses what I call logic patches, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, to fill in the gaping holes in their theories. Because the Big Bang theory has lots of holes in it. Einstein's theory of relativity has lots of holes in it. But what they do, they invent non-scientific logic patches to cover up the inadequacies in the theories. And this is what they do at all. Now, the maths of the universe does not work at all unless we add into it something called dark matter, dark energy, which for terms you may or may not have heard of. Also gravity as well, that's another logic patch. None of these have ever been proven, by the way. They're all just assumptions, even gravity. No scientist in the world can explain gravity adequately, and we'll come on to that in a little while. But here, before that, for your delight and delectation, is a picture of alleged dark matter. This is not me saying that, this is NASA, our good friends at NASA. And yeah, so, yeah, as I say, according to that bastion of truth, NASA, which obviously stands for never a straight answer. That picture you've just seen shows dark matter. And here is the accompanying quotation straight from the horse's mouth, i.e. NASA itself, in the guise of a NASA spokesman. And he said, this is the images that you've just seen I'm talking about here. This NASA Hubble telescope image shows the distribution of dark matter. Dark matter is an invisible sorry, I can't help laughing, it's just so ridiculous, isn't it? It shows the distribution of dark matter, but dark matter is an invisible form of matter. It accounts for 85% of the mass of the universe, but scientists still do not know exactly what it is. I think I rest my case there, actually. Yeah. I mean, have you ever heard such utter drivel in your life? Talk about Orwell's doublespeak, and that's that picture again, just to show you. That picture shows dark matter, but apparently it's invisible. Yeah. Now, have anyone heard of a guy by the name of Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's the American version of that lovely guy Brian Cox? Yeah, Brian Cox, my favourite scientist. Yeah. As I always like to say, as a scientist, he makes a very mediocre keyboard player. I could do a whole long presentation on him himself, but never mind. Another time, maybe. So Neil deGrasse Tyson, this is what he said. And of course, he knows what he's talking about. Anytime an astrophysicist puts the word dark in front of something, it means we have no idea what we're talking about. Thanks for that gem of wisdom, Neil. Yeah, that absolute bastion of truth. Well, I say bastion, that's pretty close to how I would describe him. He's not a scientist, this guy, by the way. Don't be under any illusions about that at all. He's just an actor playing a role. Gravity. Let's examine gravity. It's just more nonsense. Come on, John, you can't mean that, I do. How can gravity, think about this, how can gravity reconcile the fact that balloons can rise freely, the fact that butterflies can easily defeat it, fluttering up into the air, and at the same time that trillions upon trillions of tons of water stick to the underside of the globe? Think about that. And that people, animals and fish can easily swim through it, and yet it's being held firmly in position, stuck to the underside of their globe. Interesting, isn't it? And it's allegedly the glue that holds the entire universe together. This is how they describe it. Without gravity, without this ridiculous theory, and it is only a theory, another ridiculous theory, the entire model of the universe that they propound to us would just fall apart. So gravity is an example, a big example of a logic patch. It's just in there to fill in the gaps and make the maths work. A little bit more. Gravitational theory. This was propounded, as I'm sure you're aware, allegedly, by Isaac Newton. You've all heard the story of him lying under the apple tree on the edge of a pool, and he was woken up by an apple falling on his head, and it's a shame it didn't knock any sense into him, but yeah. And but the thing is about Newton, he was a high-ranking Freemason, aren't they all? And a member of the Royal Society. Now, the Royal Society is the bastion of science worldwide. It's a British institution, but it is anything scientific is controlled, strictly and tightly controlled by the Royal Society. And he was a very prominent member of the Royal Society, who, by the way, I've done some research on the Royal Society. It is populated almost 100% by senior Freemasons, certainly the upper echelons of it. Okay. Now, funnily enough, I'm sure you're all aware, but the apple is an esoteric symbol deriving from the Adam and Eve story, where she takes the bite out of the apple. And that's where the Apple logo comes from. You know, the apple with the bite out of it as well. So it's all, everything's all connected. Now Newton wrote a huge, stop it, wait for it, a huge 3-volume book called Principia Mathematica, and this was an attempt by him to explain gravity to the great unwashed. And it began with one particular word. Does anybody know what that first word in Principia Mathematica is? No. Very good. Honestly, yeah. No, it was actually if. So the whole premise is based on if. Yeah. Good, innit? Okay. So yeah, gravity is nothing more than relative density. What do you mean by that, John? Okay, I'll tell you. It's simple. If an object is denser than air, it will fall. If it's less dense than air, it will rise or float. If Newton's apple had missed his head and landed in the pond, it would have floated. Why? Because apples are less dense than water and denser than air. Pretty simple. And there you go. That proves it. So yeah, it's all a matter of relative density, and that is a simple proof of how it all works. Gravity is a nonsense, it's a concoction, it's simply a device to prove that the world is a globe and that we're living in this vast universe of their own making that is exactly as they tell us. But it took, the fact that it took a huge 3-volume book to describe how it works, for a start, that completely goes against the principle of Occam's razor. Occam's razor is a scientific principle, semi-scientific, that states that the simplest answer is usually the one most likely to be the truth. So there you had the simple answer, but they give us the complex one. Right, so that's enough on gravity for now. Moving swiftly onwards. So, what is the alternative if the Big Bang Theory is nonsense? Right, this is what I believe to be the truth, okay. The universe was created and is a result of intelligent design. Don't ask me any more than that, but that's my firm gut feeling belief. I can't prove it, of course. If I could, I'd be a very rich man, but I'm not, so there you go. So, but the universe is actually electric. There's something called the electric universe. Anybody come across that particular terminology? Yeah, good. So hopefully some of you have actually looked at that and researched it. If you haven't, I would absolutely encourage you all to research it for yourself. And I'm not going to talk about it today because there's so many other branches to this that I could go off down, but we'd be here till bedtime, so I'll spare you that. So yeah, it is the alternative to the gravity-based model, and it explains everything very, very neatly indeed. Okay. But of course, I know you'll find this hard to believe, but the scientific establishment doesn't want us to know this for whatever reason, for their own reasons. I can't understand it, but there you go. As I say, it's another topic for another time. So that concludes the bit about the Big Bang Theory. You'll be pleased to hear. And we're going to talk a little bit about the theory of evolution, during which segment I'm going to prove to you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that evolution is utter bollocks. My favourite word, that bollocks. I use it a lot, sorry. Yeah, so as most people know, Charles Darwin formulated the theory of evolution. Did he? No, it's not quite true. It was actually his grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. He first proposed the idea, and surprisingly enough, I know you'll find this hard to believe, but both Erasmus and Charles, and indeed all the Darwin family, were all senior Freemasons. That's what I mean by Freemasonic science. Okay, now surprise, surprise. In fact, the entirety of what we're talking about today is a joint Freemasonic, Jesuit, Jewish, whatever you want to call it, enterprise. So, now, the next 3 slides, or maybe 4, I can't remember, are going to absolutely prove that evolution is nonsense. You all sat there open-mouthed and incredulous, but I'll do my best. Okay, now, remember this. A simple one-cell bacterium contains DNA information units that are the equivalent of 100 million pages of the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's a simple cell bacterium. Where's that quote from? The Encyclopedia Britannica. But it is true, to be fair to them. They don't say much that's true, but that it is. So now, I get into this. The basic functional unit of a cell is a protein. Okay? Now, proteins comprise hundreds of different amino acids. And to even work, they all have to be in the right order. And a simple single-cell bacterium, again, alone, contains thousands of different proteins. And mathematicians, sorry, I've gone too far. I don't know how that happened. No, I haven't. Sorry. The molecular biologist Francis Crick, now some of you may know the name Francis Crick, he was one of the guys who was responsible for the discovery of the DNA molecule, along with James Watson, the American, at Cambridge University in the 50s. He calculated the odds of a protein occurring by chance as being 1 in 10 to the power of 260. Now, that is an absolutely huge number. For perspective, it's greater than the number of atoms in the universe. Not the number of suns, stars, whatever you want to call them, not the number of planets, not the number of sentient beings, the number of atoms. That is a truly vast number. And mathematicians classify as impossible anything having odds greater than 1 in 10 to the power of 50. Now that sounds like a big number, and it is. It's a massive, massive number, but it's magnitude upon magnitude upon magnitude smaller than the first number. Tiny. So, in other words, it's impossible. None of that could have happened. It would have been impossible to get one protein by chance, let alone the thousands of different proteins that a simple one-cell bacterium would need to function or even exist. And furthermore, a cell would also need the ability to ingest nutrients, to expel waste, and to reproduce. So if a cell ever developed by chance, that very first cell would have to develop and perfect the process of cellular reproduction in the span of its own very, very, very short lifetime, because if it didn't, there would never have been a second cell. And Darwin's evolutionary process would have ended right there. But don't tell anyone. Yeah, thanks, Charles. Now, interestingly enough, the 33rd degree Supreme Council of Freemasonry, which is the very top echelons of Freemasonry, for those of you not aware, the 33rd degree, most of the famous people are all 33rd degree Freemasons. So the council that controls the 33rd degree, this meeting in Paris, they revealed in its minutes its promotion of evolution as a science, while they themselves actually scoffed at the idea. So that just tells you, the kind of people that they are. Now the minutes read as follows. Okay. It is with this object in view that we are constantly arousing a blind confidence in these theories. The intellectuals, without any logical verification, we know this, don't we? sorry, will put into effect all the information available from science which our agents have cunningly pieced together for the purpose of educating their minds in the direction we want. Do not suppose for a minute that these are empty words. Think carefully of the successors we arranged for Darwinism. And also, this is a quote from New Age magazine in March of 1922. The kingdom of atheistic Freemasonry will be established by evolution and the development of man himself. The false scientific ideology of evolution is a deception set in the 33rd degree atheistic Freemasonic lodges. Freemasons openly admit that they will use the scientists and media, which are under their control, now there's a shock, to present this deception as scientific fact, which even they find funny. Okay, interesting quote here. David McGowan. Anybody come across David McGowan? He's another one of my early heroes, sadly no longer with us. And he said in 2006, "Of course, only a fool would question the theory of evolution, even though the theory is most closely associated with a man who, along with other members of his clan," he's talking about Darwin, and even though the concept of natural selection just happens to nicely complement the eugenics agenda, which is taken as a given by most of the scientific community, which just goes to show you, I suppose, that you shouldn't always listen to the scientific community. Well said, David. Of course, as I said before, Darwin is a high-ranking high-ranking Freemasonry. In fact, it was more than that. It was just a glove puppet used to promote the theory. Where have we heard this before? In fact, Trevor was singing about glove puppets earlier, I think, so it's been going on for a long time. Yeah, and his handler was Thomas Henry Huxley, the grandfather of Aldous Huxley. And Thomas Henry Huxley became known as Darwin's bulldog because he really fiercely promoted and used Darwin to promote this fake theory. Okay, and he was also Thomas Henry was also the grandfather of Julian Huxley, who was one of the UN founders. So everything's all connected. Everything's connected. Everything. Absolutely everything. And I always use this analogy when talking about these kind of subjects. And that is, reality is like a 10 billion, or apply whatever number you like to that, a 10 billion piece jigsaw. Imagine the jigsaw. You start to put pieces in place of what reality is really like, and eventually the picture starts to build. And the picture becomes clearer, and that then in turn enables you to put more and more pieces into place. Excuse me. And that's how it works. So quite a lot of the stuff that I come up with is part of this 10 billion piece jigsaw. And it helps you to discern what is correct and what isn't as well. Because there's so much, as I'm sure you're aware, there's so much disinformation going on in this world. It's really difficult to actually sometimes discern what's real and what's not. Because of obviously they saturate the truth movement with all sorts of side issues and lies in order to divide and conquer us, basically. So yeah, they want us to believe that we evolved from pond slime. They tell us that over several billion years, amino acids mixed with the primordial soup, as they refer to it, and this magically created life as we know it. But strangely enough, well, I say strange, it's not strange to me, they've never managed to replicate it, ever, under any circumstances. They're trying the best, bless them, but no, they've never managed it. And of course, it's just another scam, just like the Big Bang. So let's examine a few details regarding evolution. So we've talked about the general overview of it, but let's have a look at the actual details of it. Two major elements to it. Macroevolution and microevolution. Now, let's look at each of those individually. We'll look at microevolution first. Microevolution is the gradual process of species evolving defense mechanisms as a survival tool, which is quite plausible. You know, over a long, long period of time, you know, I use this as an example actually. There's a species called peppered moths. This is just one example of many, many, many billions, millions. Okay, peppered moths. Over 1 million years, they adapt it to their own environment, and they have a pattern on their wings that looks very, very, very similar, almost indistinguishable from the trees upon which they tend to live. Okay, so over millions of years, they adapt themselves to the environment. And of course, what happens then is that it provides them with camouflage, and it enables them to evade predators. Thus, the better protected ones became the ones whose genes would be passed on to their offspring. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that element to it, but the thing is that evolutionists actually conflate the two. So they tell us all that stuff and assume that we will assume that this applies to macroevolution, which is a completely different concept. And this involves the changing of one species into another over time. This, I would propound, is totally impossible. No change of this nature has ever been recorded. The fossil record proves that to be the case, although evolutionists will tell you the opposite. They're lying. They're absolutely lying. Real biologists, real paleontologists will tell you that that is not the case. And what's more, if it was true, there would be thousands of examples of interim species. Where are the interim species? None exist. None exist. And you know, just let's examine that particular statement itself, an interim species. How is it possible to have a creature part way between two distinct species? It's, when you think about it, it's just not. And let's look at that in a bit more detail. For example, how is it possible to evolve an eye, or a kidney, or a lung? Think about that for a minute. Just how is it possible? What use would a partially developed organ be to any creature? That's not how nature works at all. It doesn't do that. You know, this kind of hit me like an epiphany a few years back. And I just thought, yeah, crikey, why did I believe all that stuff? It just doesn't make any sense when you actually think about that, even that, just one element of it. Partially developed organs. It's just not possible. And how could a creature one day give birth to one of its offspring, and this offspring contain an eye or a lung? It just, you know, when you think about it, it just doesn't make any sense at all. And, you know, that's another example. How is it possible for fish to develop legs and turn into reptiles, as we're taught? This is what evolution tells us. It's just, you know, are we asked to believe that a fish randomly began a process that would take millions of generations to complete? You know, when you think about it in those terms, none of it just makes any sense whatsoever. Okay. And even Darwin admitted that interim species were totally impossible. And he said, and this is a direct quote from him, "As by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed. Why do we not find them embedded in the crust of the earth? Why is not all nature in a confusion of halfway species, instead of being, as we see them, well-defined species?" And, yeah, just a little aside there, as well as being a Freemason, Darwin was also a lay preacher, but that's neither here nor there, really. So, this is a quote from an evolutionary biologist, Stephen, at Harvard University in the States. He said, "The known fossil record fails to document a single example of evolution accomplishing a major transition. Every paleontologist knows that most species don't change." And this is straight from the mouth of a prominent evolutionary biologist. So why he continues to believe that nonsense, your guess is as good as mine. And another quote from a Canadian scientist by the name of Thomson. He said, I'm not satisfied that Darwin proved his point or that his influence in scientific and public thinking has been beneficial. The success of Darwinism was accomplished by a decline in scientific integrity. Well, you can say that again, Mr. Thompson. Totally. Oh, God, surely, John. No. No, 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 no. Yeah. Yeah, what about kids' pyjamas? Did they ever exist? Yeah. They're just another, what I call a patch for an insubstantial theory. And they're used as a transition to explain sea to land and land to air creatures. But, you know, given all the propaganda and so-called knowledge that we have of these creatures, how can that statement possibly be true, that dinosaurs never existed? And have you ever wondered why they're so prominent in society today? They're everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, bloody dinosaurs. I'm sick of the damn things. I hate them. They're in children's toys, they're in books, games, computer games, films. And it's just a recent thing, this. Yeah, pyjamas. I should change the slide, shouldn't I? Yeah. Pyjamas makes mental note. And it's just a recent thing, you know. I mean, I'm an old git, but when I was, you know, much younger, yeah, we knew that they were supposed to exist, that they're, you know, these ancient creatures, but they weren't everywhere like they are today. I mean, what is going on? You know, why would they do this? Why? Why, oh, why, oh, why? Well, it's just more propaganda. Just more evolutionary propaganda. And it's also a distraction or deflection as well from the real truth. But let's talk a little bit more about it. Let's have a look at the facts. Right. This is what they tell us, that they died out 65 million. Some say 66 million, which would make more sense. Years ago, as a result of a meteorite. This is another theory. There's absolutely no proof. They just make this shit up. They really do, honestly. It's just crazy. And I asked myself the question, why did none survive when other lizards and reptiles did, even larger ones? But no, dinosaurs all died. Oh, sad, isn't it? Yeah, the poor things. Now, no culture, interestingly, anywhere in the world, ever, has got any verbal or written histories confirming their existence. And more importantly than that, because you could kind of explain that away, no dinosaur fossils were ever found anywhere in the world before the 1850s. And when was the theory of evolution first proposed? Coincidence. I'm a coincidence theorist. Yeah. Now, strangely enough, when asked, even all the natural history museums admit that all the bones are fake. They do, however, say, God, I hate using this mouse on this, it don't work properly. They do have said that the real ones are too valuable to be displayed, and they're all kept under lock and key, and no one is allowed to see them, which to me is very, very convenient. Yeah. Apparently you have to have a special license to view dinosaur bones in the basement of the Natural History Museum, and also places like the Smithsonian in America. Very convenient indeed, isn't it? Now, interesting quote from a Smithsonian Institute scientist here, Dr. Ståls Olsen. He said, "The idea of dinosaurs and the theropod origin of birds is being actively promulgated by a cadre of zealous scientists acting in concert with certain editors at Nature and National Geographic, who themselves have become outspoken and highly biased proselytizers of the truth, of the faith. Truth and careful scientific weighing of evidence have been among the first casualties in the programme, you don't say, which is now fast becoming one of the grander scientific hoaxes of our age." And that is pretty powerful stuff from a Smithsonian Institute guy. Okay. Now, I don't know if some of you may be aware of this. There's a huge factory in China that, it's true, that openly admits to supplying all the fake bones. Okay. And this company, and I urge you to look it up on the internet if you haven't already, and it's called the Zhejiang Dino Ocean Art Company, and it's based in Sichuan, China, and they openly admit that they provide all the animal bones, all the dinosaur bones, should I say, for all the major natural history museums throughout the world. So it's there in black and white on their website. Well, it's actually in colour. Now, they say, and again, this is a quote from them, they say real animal bones are melted down, mixed with glue, resin and plaster, then used as a base material for recasting as dinosaur bones. And another short quote there from a guy whose surname I can't pronounce. The entire dinosaurian field of the paleontological program is a sham. And he is a researcher and author, Robin Curford. Now, this is very interesting. I had a conversation a few years ago with a guy who just wanted to be known as Sam, and he is a molecular biologist. Okay, and this is what he said to me. He said, to be a molecular biologist requires one to hold on to two contradictory insanities at all times. One, it would be insane to believe in evolution when you can see the truth for yourself. Two, it would be insane to admit you don't believe in evolution. All government work, research grants, papers, big college lectures, everything would stop. I'd be out of a job or relegated to the outer fringes where I couldn't earn a decent living. And then he went on to say, the work I do in genetic research is honourable, but in the meantime we have to live with the elephant in the living room. Intelligent design is that elephant in the living room. It moves around, takes up an enormous amount of space, loudly trumpets, bumps into us, knocks things over, eats a ton of hay and smells like an elephant. And yet we have to swear it isn't there. Which just about sums up not just evolution, but many, many other scientific disciplines as well. This is what they have to do. They know that if they don't toe the party line, they're out of a job, and they would suffer greatly, I guess, so would the families. And there it is, the elephant in the living room. Probably the very same elephant that he was referring to. No, it isn't. Yeah. So, yeah. So we are other issues regarding the theory of evolution. Human skeletons have been found in coal and rocks that are several hundreds of millions of years old. Again, it's not me just making this stuff up. This is documented. This is from a very old book that I have in my possession. And it's true. And of course, these are never reported in the mainstream. And evolutionists are constantly distorting the truth. If you actually mentioned that second statement to an evolutionist, they would deny it till they were black in the face. Or blue in the face. Or red in the face, but more than likely. And they fake fossils. Piltdown Man? Anyone heard of Piltdown Man? It's not that far from here, is it? Piltdown? Yeah. Where is it actually? Is it in Sussex? Yeah. Piltdown Man. So you've all heard of that. That's good, because we're going to talk about that in a minute. And evolution versus religious creationism is just another example of the Hegelian dialectic. In other words, divide and conquer. And they talk about Neanderthal man being the missing link. And at that point in time, we're about halfway through. I don't know how long that actually took, but we'll have a little break because there is so much more to cover. Thanks so far. Let me say before we start, that I am not necessarily a flat earther. Okay, not necessarily. I've still got an open mind on it. But what I do believe, quite firmly, is that the Earth is much, much bigger than they tell us. Much, much bigger. And I'll show you an interesting map at the end. Some of you may already have seen it. But this map actually hangs in the lobby of the UN building in New York. And I'll show you that at the end. And it's called Hiding in Plain Sight, or Revelation of the Method. Some people prefer it. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the globe Earth theory. It's not really a theory, it's propounded as fact, isn't it? But there are lots and lots of different arguments against it. Some people don't believe it, some people think it's a psyop. As I say, I'm reasonably open-minded on it. But I'm going to talk to you now as though I do believe it. But just bear that in mind, okay? So, oops, wrong way, sorry. So, yeah, that's Alice saying, how far down the rabbit hole have you been lately? Yeah, a long, long way. A long, long way. Yeah. And people say to me, why does it matter if the Earth is actually flat and not a spinning ball in space? I mean, I hear that a lot. Well, I think it's quite self-evident, really, why it matters. If they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? The answer to that is probably just about everything. But, you know, to me, that's kind of an obtuse question. What does it matter? Of course it bloody matters. If you want to know the truth about what's going on, it matters. Right. It is. But I'd like you to come with me down the rabbit hole to explore it. You know, like I said, if the Earth is flat, what does that tell us about the entirety of the model of the universe that they relentlessly propound to us? Now, it's just a bit of nonsense, but and I thought to myself, well, that's probably the best ever argument I've ever heard for the globe Earth. Yeah, those of you who own cats will know exactly what I mean by that. Yeah, so it's, as I say, it's possibly the strongest argument I've ever heard. Joking aside, though, yeah. The Earth does not spin. That's a big statement, John. Come on, what do you mean the Earth doesn't spin? Well, let's look at all this stuff in detail. Okay. Now, there's a interesting quote here from, anybody recognise those lyrics? Yeah. Very true. Very true. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, around 500 years ago, everybody believed that the Earth was flat. Even the ancient Greek mathematicians, and these were not stupid people. They knew lots of stuff. In fact, they probably knew a lot more than mathematicians today know. But even they believed it was flat, and they could work it out. And such great thinkers as Plato, Socrates, Euclid, Archimedes, all of them, all believed it was flat. Then around 500 years ago, something happened. And a gentleman by the name of Copernicus, Copernicus, declared it to be a globe spinning in space. Yeah. And, of course, he was persecuted by the Catholic Church for that, because at that point in time, the Catholic Church wanted everybody to believe it was flat, which was true. Okay. So, and then shortly afterwards, along came Freemasonry, back to that old topic again. And, of course, they thought, what a great idea. Let's have a globe. And they began to push the narrative, and it slowly gained traction over the years. And eventually, it was assimilated into our culture, if you like, for want of a better word. And it became the received wisdom, i.e. it was accepted as the truth. But flat Earth was a concept believed by every single culture on Earth up until that very point. So many issues with the globe model. And at best, this short presentation, can only be a very, very brief introduction. And for those of you who are still skeptical at the end of it, I would urge you to do your own research, because I started off researching flat Earth as an absolute avid glober. And this is a truism. Most people who believe in the flat Earth start off trying to disprove it. And then suddenly they come around to the idea that, oh, maybe there is something to, regarding this. As I say, I'm not 100% convinced just yet, but I definitely think that the Earth is not the shape that they tell us. It could be round, it could be a globe, but I believe it's very, very much bigger than they tell us. And just a little plug for an upcoming book that I'm writing with a friend, joint enterprise. And it's going to be called 60 Degrees South, and it will be published either back end of this month or early next month. And it's 60 Degrees South, it's called, and the strapline, the subtitle, is Beyond the Ice Wall. It's okay. It's a novel. It's not fact. It's a novel, but it drops lots of truth bombs in there about the Earth, and it's about what lies beyond the ice wall. Okay, but let's look at it more closely. Excuse me. Now, the flat Earth model, for those of you who are not aware, is a circular disc covered with a transparent dome of unknown composition. And all around the edge is a 200-foot ice wall, which we know as Antarctica. And this is why on the flat Earth model, I know it sounds crazy, this is why the oceans don't spill over the edge, because that Antarctica is all around the edge of the flat Earth, covered with a firmament, a dome. Okay. So inside this dome, the sun and moon, which are small and close and not far away, circulate daily. And there is the ice wall. And that is a picture that continues around the entire circumference of Antarctica. There are only 2 or 3 inlets to Antarctica where the ice wall is broken slightly. People say to me, because one of my things, and this is what my book 60 Degrees South is all about, it's about the fact that the UN patrols the 60th parallel south, and they do not allow any boats or any planes to cross that 60th parallel. They warn them, and if they don't heed the warning and go back, they're shot down or sunk. This is not me making this stuff up. This is absolutely true. Absolutely true. So what are they hiding? What are they hiding? Now, this dome, if it exists, it prevents the Earth's atmosphere from dissipating into space. Because when you think about it, what holds the atmosphere in on the globe? Pardon? Thanks. You've just ruined my presentation now. Well, yeah, exactly. That's what they tell us, gravity, isn't it? But, it's just nonsense. How can gravity hold in atmosphere? It just doesn't make sense. And I was always taught at school, I don't know about you guys, and it's a long time since I was at school, and I still remember it, in science lessons, that nature hates a vacuum, and it does all it can to try and fill it. Now, we're told that outside the Earth's atmosphere is a vacuum. QED. I rest my case on that one. Now, as I said, the sun and moon, this is according to real flat earthers. And by real flat earthers, I don't mean the Flat Earth Society. That's just a psyop. That's just a distraction. So if you read any of their stuff, just dismiss it, because it's disinformation, the Flat Earth Society. And they use it to thank you, discredit. Who said that? Sorry. Do you want to? No. All right. Yeah, so according to the real flat earthers, the sun and moon are local spheres, and they're both 51 kilometers in diameter. They're exactly the same size as each other. And interestingly enough, and this again is a true fact, the sun provides warm light and the moon provides cold light. And that is absolutely true because you can do the experiment yourself. Obviously, the sun provides warm light, we know that, and when you step into the shade, it's cooler. Now, if you do the same with moonlight and step into the shade, it's warmer. Anybody ever tried that? Good. So there you go. Interesting, isn't it? And this is the $64,000 question. Why would they lie to us about the Earth being a globe, if it is a lie? Because, there's that word again, beginning with F, and not that one. Freemasonry and the Royal Society absolutely, totally control all scientific knowledge. They do not want us to know that the Earth is a globe in much the same way they don't want us to know that the theory of evolution is crap, as is the Big Bang Theory. And why, this will become apparent as I go through this. Okay, but basically, they want us to believe that we're nothing. We're just a random cosmic accident, and all those three elements actually go to make up that belief within humanity. So, the globe Earth model facilitates that idea by creating the idea that we're just one of billions and billions of civilizations out there in this vast universe of theirs. And also, our old friends, NASA, never a straight answer. Interestingly enough, NASA was formed in 1958, and that was as a result of an idea first mooted in the 1940s by 4 individuals. Those who've read Falsification of Science may know the answer to this already, but does anybody know who those 4 individuals were? You do? Okay. She'll tell everybody else, shall I? Let them into the secret. Jack Parsons, yeah. Aleister Crowley. L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. And good old Walt. Seriously, those 4 people propounded the idea of forming a space agency to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. And they were later joined by another famous name, Werner von Braun, the German rocket scientist who went to America as a result of something called Operation Paperclip, which is another story for another time. Now, what did those 5 people have in common? I hear you ask. And of course, they were all practicing occultists and Satanists, as well as Freemasons. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. I like this when people are doing the presentation for me. It's great. I'm just kidding. Yeah, and Parsons and Crowley were good mates, and they were also active senior members of the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, which is an offshoot of Satanism. And they believed that it would be beneficial to create an organization that would propound the myths of outer space, just to reinforce the message so that everybody was saturated with that idea, so much so that they could never believe that that was anything but the truth. And this is what we get all the time with other things, isn't it? As I said, von Braun was a rocket scientist, recruited through Paperclip. And together they formed the basis of the organization that was to become NASA probably about 10 years later. Now, NASA has become the de facto sole arbiter of the truth about space, and they control all the knowledge regarding that. And it's still populated by, at the top level, by Freemasons and Satanists whose only desire is to control the masses, you and I, pull the wool over our eyes and make us believe that we live in a totally different reality to the actual reality that we do live in. And one of the key goals of the proposed New World Order, as you all are aware, I'm sure, is to totally control and subjugate humanity in every possible way that they can. And another one of them is to keep all the truth of our origins from us in order that they can maintain their power over us. Here is an interesting quote from a guy called William Casey, who was CIA director at one point during the Reagan administration. We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. So let's look at some facts. This is a model. Some of you have probably seen this diagram before because it is fairly ubiquitous on the internet, on Tinterweb, as they say, where I come from. This is the impossible solar system. If you believe in the globe Earth model, this is exactly what you believe, that all those motions are happening at the same time. You've got the sun, big yellow blob in the middle, which, by the way, travels through the universe at 660,000 miles per hour. Just a coincidence. Yeah, it could be. Yeah. And all those motions are happening, but the alignment of all the stars that we see never changes, and it never has changed since the beginning of time. So the sun is traveling at 660,000 miles, and all the planets are still managing to revolve around it because of gravity. And the Earth is traveling at 66,000 miles around the sun, as well as spinning on its own axis at 1,000 miles an hour, which we'll discuss very shortly. So yeah, all the other planets and their moons, don't forget there's moons as well, they're all doing exactly the same thing, held together by the magic gravity from the sun. And while none of the other forces that are involved mess with each other. I believe that. Of course I do. So, now the alleged curvature of the Earth, if it is the size that they tell us, and I highly doubt that, it can be calculated by the formula 8 inches per mile multiplied by the square root of the distance. That's not me, that's not my formula, that is the official Earth curvature calculation formula. So for example, that means that on a 6-mile stretch of water, that the Earth dips, or the water level dips 6 feet at either end, with a central point 6 feet higher in the middle. Can you kind of visualize that? It's a globe. We're talking about a 6-foot hump of water in the middle there, okay? And it continues. There was something called the Bedford levels experiment that those of you who looked into this probably aware of, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But that was conducted in the 1890s. And this proved conclusively, if not that the Earth is not a globe, it proved conclusively that there is no such thing as a 6-foot dip on a 6-mile stretch, 6-foot hump on a 6-mile stretch of water. Okay, but we'll talk about that later. Now, interestingly enough, flights in the southern hemisphere. Has anybody ever looked into this particular notion about how flights in the southern hemisphere work? Okay, but obviously there's quite a few of you don't, so lots of strange anomalies, very strange anomalies. And it provides us with lots of circumstantial, if not categoric, proof that the Earth is not a globe. And let's look at a typical one, and this is just one of many. Okay, I've just picked this one at random for no other reason than it was there. Okay, Santiago in Chile, on the west coast of South America. There is a regular scheduled flight from there to Sydney, Australia. And that you'd think that we're looking at the globe model, you'd think that'd just be a simple hop across the Pacific, wouldn't you? Kind of slightly southwest, or yeah, slightly southwest. But no. No, where does that flight go? First of all, it goes north on the globe Earth model to the east coast of the United States. Just picture that for a second. Across the USA to the west coast, then traverses the length of the Pacific Ocean and down to Sydney, Australia. And then from there across to Christchurch if you're going all the way to New Zealand. How odd. Let's take a look at that route, first on a globe Earth map and then a flat Earth map. Okay, so this is the route on the globe Earth. You see it goes north up to America, across, back down, right? Well, you know, you'd think it'd be the green route, wouldn't you? No. No. That is the same route on the flat Earth map. Okay, here's Christchurch, here's Sydney, there's Santiago. There you go. There's lots more examples of these strange airline routes. Johannesburg in South Africa to Sao Paulo in Brazil, that goes via London. And even on a globe, sir, even on a globe, that doesn't make sense. Trust me. Santiago in Chile again to Johannesburg, South Africa. Refuels in North Africa. Again, you'd imagine it was just, all right, it's a curve, but you'd just imagine it's more or less a straight line. You certainly wouldn't go up there, even though it is curved. Okay, those are not the only ones. There's just a small example. But again, research it yourself if you don't believe me. That's all I would say. I think you might be enlightened. Okay, so let's forget that for now. We'll talk about solar eclipses, and this is another interesting one. The first problem with solar eclipses on the globe model is that sometimes, but not always, eclipses approach from the west. Why would that be? Sometimes, but not always. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, we're told that the moon rotates around the Earth from east to west, but in the example of the moon during a westerly approaching eclipse, it's obviously eclipsing the sun from the west. So how could that possibly work? It couldn't. Now, very great, these people. One NASA scientist actually said, it's funny, isn't it? It's because the moon rotates from west to east. And another came out with this little gem. It's because the moon rotates around the Earth twice as fast as the Earth spins. Now, these people, don't you think something's very wrong when even these so-called experts at NASA don't even understand the basics of their own bloody science? I mean, that is just total nonsense. Total nonsense. So, in 2017, during the last major solar eclipse, specifically referring to the US, the moon's shadow was only 73 miles wide as it traversed across the North American continent. What is wrong with that picture, you may ask? Think about how big the moon is. How can a shadow be smaller than the object casting the shadow? Think about that one as well. That's not how shadows work. The moon is over 2,000 miles in diameter, so the shadow should have been at least that wide. This is how shadows really work, which is going to be on the slide after next. But first of all, I'm going to show you the path of the eclipse that the eclipse took in 2017. And that's kind of almost more or less to scale. Okay, so that is a 73-mile wide path across the United States. It's probably slightly bigger than it should be, but it gives you an idea. Now, how can a moon cast a shadow like that? This is how shadows really work. Okay? And the closer the light source is to the object that's casting the shadow, the larger the shadow is. But under no circumstances, no matter how far away the light source, could the shadow be smaller than the object which is casting the shadow. Food for thought. And it's extremely strange that nobody has ever been able to detect any movement whatsoever of the Earth, despite it allegedly spins at 1,000 miles an hour. It's never been detected. Never been detected. In fact, if it was spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, vertically fired missiles should fall due west, because as they go up in the air, the Earth rotates underneath them, spinning from east to west. The cannonball or whatever you shoot upwards would drop slightly west of where it was fired from. And the spin of the Earth should significantly affect the timings of plane flights for the same reason, but it doesn't. But again, gravity, here's where the gravity is the catch-all for everything. How does it hold in place against everything in place against a 1,000 miles per hour spin, but actually small insects and birds can fly around freely? Think about it. If the Earth was spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, an airliner flying east, travelling at over 500 miles an hour, would never reach its destination before it was overtaken by its destination from behind. And landing planes on runways wouldn't be an easy task either with a 1,000 miles per hour spin. Runways face every conceivable direction you can imagine, and it would be practically impossible to land. And clouds and wind could not unpredictably move in all directions, with clouds often travelling in opposing directions at varying altitudes simultaneously. And that's what happens. That is, this is not made up. This has been observed to happen on rare occasions. It does actually happen. And there we are again, the impossible solar system, just showing you the incredible amounts of movement that is going on all at once, and yet we don't feel a thing. I think we'd all be car sick if that was going on. Even not being in a car. Just to remind you of that model. Okay. Now, there was a guy by the name of Miroslav Hermashevsky. There still is a guy by the name of Miroslav Hermashevsky. And he stated the following at the end of an interview at a conference where he was a guest of honor. And by the way, Hermashevsky is a national hero in Poland. Okay, is one of the main icons in Poland. And the interviewer said to him, "You've been there. Is Earth really a sphere hanging in outer space?" This is all on record. And this is what he said. "The Earth is flat." I didn't expect this question. I assure you it's flat. Yeah. And another one similar. Aldrin, the alleged second man on the moon, said while being interviewed by an 8-year-old girl, and this clip is still on YouTube. Has anybody seen it? Yeah. Oh, you've all seen it. Okay, so the girl, for those of you who haven't, the girl said, "Why have we never been back to the moon?" And he said, "That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. But the reason we've never been back is because we never went there." Okay, Buzz, thanks for clearing that up. Yeah. Last time I looked, the video clip was still on YouTube. And by the way, Buzz Aldrin is a 33rd degree Freemason, as were all the moon astronauts. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. And by the way, has anybody ever seen the interview of the press conference of the astronauts when they arrived back from the moon? I have never seen a more miserable, morose bunch of individuals in my life. It's again, that's on the internet. Look it up. They just sat there. They look extremely embarrassed. They look, you'd think, having just achieved this incredible journey and done something that man had never done before, they'd be quite buoyant and full of themselves. No, they just sit there staring down at the floor and twiddling with the pencils and looking very disinterested. And I think it was Patrick Moore, the British astronomer who's now dead, but at that time, and he asked a question of them, and he said, "Did you, what was it like to see the stars in all their glory?" And the answer came back, "Never even noticed them." Yeah, you just think, wow. Now, we'll talk about the Bedford level experiment, which I alluded to a few moments ago. This was in 1838, and it was carried out in order to prove that the Earth was flat. And it involved a guy by the name of Samuel Rowbotham. He waded into the Bedford River in Norfolk with a telescope held 8 inches, 20 centimetres for the younger element, above the water level. And he watched a boat with a 5-foot mast row slowly away from him, and the boat remained fully in view for the entire 6-mile journey to Welney Bridge, which was obviously 6 miles down the river. Using the accepted curvature calculation, which is what I mentioned before, then that boat should have been invisible behind 11 feet of curvature. Now, the Bedford experiment was repeated many, many times during the following century because people didn't believe it. They thought, no, that can't be true, that's not right. So lots of people repeated it and the results were exactly the same. And that's kind of a visual representation of it. There's the boat with the white flag on the globe. Good old Samuel, he wouldn't be able to see it. And there was something called the Bishop experiment. Now, Monterey Bay, California is apparently 23 miles wide. I've been to California, but a few times. I've never been to Monterey Bay, so I'll have to take their word for it. I think it's true, obviously. Now, using a telescope, a guy by the name of Tom Bishop could plainly see people walking on the beach and splashing in the ocean at the far side of the bay. 23 miles wide, don't forget. Now, from that vantage point, the entire beach and the bay is visible. But using that accepted curvature calculation method, our friend, the far side of the bay should have been invisible behind 300 feet of curvature. 300 feet. And that's a visual representation of Tom Bishop's experiment. He was stood here. He was stood at the bottom end, looking across to the beach at the top end, 23 miles. Now, this is a good one. That's a picture that was taken of Chicago from 40 miles away across Lake Michigan. And at that distance, Chicago, you can see the buildings right down to the bottom, all the way down to the bottom, and the whole thing should have been 1,060 feet below the horizon, using the accepted Earth curvature calculation. More examples. And I've seen this for myself. The distance along the Irish Sea from Douglas Harbour on the Isle of Man, in the Irish Sea, southwards to the Great Orme in Llandudno in North Wales, it's actually 60 miles. And if the Earth was a globe, then the surface of the water between them would form a 60-mile arc, the centre towering 1,944 feet higher than the coastlines at either end. And it's well known by locals and easily verifiable that on a clear day, the Great Orme is clearly visible from base to summit. For those of you who don't know, the Great Orme is a mountain on the North Wales coast. It's clearly visible from base to summit from Douglas Harbour and the Isle of Man. And there's a graphical representation of that. There you go. Some more examples. Philadelphia skyline, clearly visible from a place called Apple Pie Hill in New Jersey, 40 miles away. The Philadelphia skyline should be well hidden beyond 335 feet of curvature. New York, skyline from Harriman State Park, 60 miles away. The New York skyline should be invisible behind 170 feet of curvature. And so it goes on. I won't read all these out, but I'll just give you a moment to read it yourself. So yeah, that one, 120 miles away. If the Earth was a ball, 25 miles in circumference, as they tell us, those skylines should be hidden by more than 800 feet of curvature. I'll keep going, because I'll give you the most dramatic one. Yeah. From Anchorage, Alaska, on clear days, Mount Foraker can be seen with the naked eye 120 miles away. If the Earth was a globe, blah, 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 25,000 miles in circumference, Mount Foraker's 17,400 foot summit should be leaning back away from the observer. Okay, so imagine the globe. They wouldn't be standing upright like that, would it be? And it's the same with big, tall buildings like the view of Chicago as well, and I'll show you that in a moment again. Okay. So it should be covered by 7,719 feet of curvature, which is more than a mile. So it should have been more than a mile below the horizon. But the entire mountain can quite easily be seen, standing straight from base to summit. Now, again, that's another view of Chicago, only from 59 miles away. It says, if the Earth is a ball, as we're indoctrinated to believe, the ground at the base of the buildings would be 2,320 feet below the horizon. Worse yet, the illustration below is incorrect, as the buildings would be leaning away from our viewpoint. How is this possible? How is it possible? Answers on a postcard. Yeah. Right, this is an interesting picture from our old friends NASA. Two different alleged photographs of the Earth from NASA. What's wrong with this picture? Yeah, you noticed. It's a photograph, though. It's a genuine photograph taken from outer space. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, if you can't figure out that someone is lying to you, it's okay. We're coming to the end now. You'll be pleased to hear. We'll talk about summary and conclusion. A few more slides to go, but okay. And this is what I said earlier, as everyone was coming back in. Those who take the time to research the flat Earth invariably become flat earthers, which is exactly what happened to me. And these are my words, by the way. The modern atheistic Big Bang, heliocentric, globe Earth, chance evolution paradigm spiritually controls humanity by removing a creator or intelligent design and replaces purposeful creation with haphazard, random, cosmic coincidence. And that continues. If the Earth is the center of the universe, then the idea of creation and a purpose for human existence is self-evident. But if the Earth is just one of billions of planets revolving around billions of stars in billions of galaxies, then the ideas of creation and a specific purpose for Earth and human existence become highly implausible, which in effect means that we are simply random specks of nothingness, which denies the fact that we are all powerful spiritual beings. It removes our power to stand up to them, these monsters who rule over us with an iron fist in a velvet glove sometimes. And a quote from that John Hamer character again. Using the flat Earth model as a basis, evolution and the Big Bang simply do not compute. A flat, stationary Earth inside a dome of unknown composition with a closed, fixed universe of stars and wandering stars, planets, rotating around inside the dome, clearly points to intelligent design of some kind and completely negates all deceptions. And here is the map that is hanging in the lobby of the United Nations building in New York. Okay, so here you have our realm. Here's the Antarctic ice wall. What's all this stuff here? For some reason, if that is true, for some reason they don't want us to know about that. Hence the UN Antarctic Treaty. You're not allowed to go beyond Antarctica. You're not allowed. So now, you know, why would they put a picture like that? Just to confuse us all? Or do we think there might be some truth in it? I tend to go for the latter. Okay, and the government, not just the government, but the people who control the government, because, you know, they don't rule us. It's, you know, the people who sit up here, as you all know, I'm sure. The government doesn't want us to expand our consciousness. If we ever begin to recognize that we're all powerful souls that create our own reality, it will take away their power to enslave us. This is why there's fluoride in the water, chemtrails in the sky, HARP energy to affect our minds, aspartame in our food, and genetically modified organisms. This is why we are bombarded with distractions to keep our minds occupied and with things that don't matter. They don't want us to think at all. So, why all the lies? Why all the lies? I mean, I've covered that, but I'll do it again. If there was no globe, that equals no rotation, no gravity, no heliocentricity, no Big Bang theory, no evolutionary theory, no missing links, no random chance creation. the universe, no universe as we believe it to be. We're therefore unique, the center of everything, a product of intelligent design, and this means once everyone believes this, it leads to the awakening of all mankind and the end of the New World Order. Is that reason enough? Okay, well, that's the end of the presentation. So, thank you very much.